Hey, it's Dr. John Terry, the Black Belt Leader, and welcome to the Black Belt Leadership Podcast, where each week I'm giving you tips, tools, insights, and resources to help you become a better version of who you are and what you do as you discover, develop, and deploy your own Black Belt leader within. Hey, this week I want to talk about the man who won and lost it all. Now, in July 356 BC, King Philip II of Macedonia and his wife Olympias welcomed a new son into the world. That son's name was Alexander. That's right, the Alexander, Alexander the Great. Now, if you don't know the backstory, King Philip was the 18th king of Macedonia. Now, he is credited with restoring internal peace to a country that had been allied by conflict for year after year after year after year as he brought together what was known as the League of Corinth. Now, by 339 BC, Philip had gained both military and diplomatic control over all of Greece, and he ruled the Greek nation states as their supreme ruler until he was assassinated in 336 BC. Now, Alexander was in his late teens, early 20s at the time of his father's death. But between the ages of 13 and 16, Alexander was sent by his father to study at the feet of the famed philosopher Aristotle. Now, it was during Alexander's time learning from this great, gifted, knowledgeable man that he studied philosophy, he studied medicine, and he studied science. Now, upon his return to Macedonia, Alexander continued his military training and there demonstrated his ability to perform both as a military leader and as a diplomat. And it was through that he earned the trust of the military and the trust of other leaders and the trust of those that he would be leading. Now, after his father's assassination, Alexander succeeded his father with the army's overwhelming endorsement and not a single challenger to the throne. Now, shortly after he rose to the kingship of Macedon, Alexander, now in his early 20s, set his sights on global expansion. During his time with Aristotle, he had an opportunity to learn about the known world. And something stirred inside of Alexander that he said, I want to control the known world. Now, Alexander understood that to maintain the army that his father had built and to be able to go and do the global expansion that he wanted, Macedon itself didn't have enough wealth. He needed the wealth of another empire that could sustain his army and give it the tools and the resources and additional manpower it would need to go where no one had gone and to conquer countries and global empires that no one had conquered before. There, Alexander's thoughts turned to the Persian Empire. Now, previous expeditionary treks into Persia had revealed several vulnerabilities that could be exploited during a time of military conquest. So in the spring of 334 BC, Alexander assembled and led an army of 30,000 foot soldiers and 5,000 cavalry into Persia. Now, in battle after battle, Alexander continually proved himself to be a masterful tactician and a military strategist that bordered on genius. His unconventional approach to warfare really set him apart as unique and different. Now, the quest to dominate Persia really culminated, many historians say, in the Battle of Issus, because it was there that Alexander won a decisive victory. The Persian army was literally routed, and their king, Darius, actually fled, leaving his family to the fate of Alexander. Now, it was shortly after Alexander's conquest of Persia that he set his sights on Egypt and the Mediterranean coast. Now, as he and his army expanded and went forward, Egypt wisely surrendered to Alexander's rule. And in that moment, Alexander saw the added wealth of Egypt to Macedonia's coffers. This was going to allow he and his growing army to be able to finance going even further, to go where no one had gone before. So this financial assistance helped fund Alexander's ongoing quest, his passion, his drive, his vision to conquer the known world. So from Egypt and the Mediterranean coast, Alexander now set his eyes on Central Asia and India. Well, after Central Asia and India fell to Alexander's forces, Alexander's vision of conquering the known world, as it had been revealed to him by Aristotle, had now been completed. But Alexander at this point wasn't done. He now set his sights on the world yet unknown. But at some point, his soldiers finally pushed back, resisted, and almost mutinied because they desired to go back home to their families after more than a decade of fighting. So Alexander ultimately relented, understanding and wanting to be sensitive to his soldiers, having dedicated more than a year of his life to his conquest, and he and his troops turned their eyes and began to march back toward Macedonia. Now, on June 13th, 323 BC, in Babylon, Alexander the Great died at the age of 33. He had become ill about 10 days prior from an extended period of banqueting and excessive drinking. Now, after reigning as what is known as the Great King over this vast empire for more than 12 years, Alexander left a kingdom in turmoil. There was no designated heir to the throne, and there was no plan in place for his empire to be governed in his absence. Now, if you look at the historical records, Alexander's considered by many historians to be one of the greatest, if not the greatest, and most successful of all military commanders. His conquest led to the spread of the Hellenistic culture across much of the known world. It significantly impacted the course of history. Now, Alexander the Great was undefeated in battle. That's a conquest in and of itself. And as we look back and forth in history, we see that Alexander the Great was only matched throughout the annals of history by only two other military leaders. One of those was Genghis Khan, and the other was Khalid ibn al-Walid. So the question is this: what made Alexander the Great such a powerful military genius and an empire builder? What can we learn from Alexander's life and the leadership principles that he practiced that we can apply to our lives today? Well, here's what I can tell you to lead off. Alexander was ambitious. And by all accounts, he was a man of tremendous passion and a man of tremendous drive. He was a charismatic figure. He was a charismatic figure and a visionary leader who rallied a loyal army of followers who were committed to help Alexander achieve his goal of conquest, even at the cost of their own lives. Now, Alexander was a leader, but he was not your typical military leader of the day. Now, unlike the men who had come before him, Alexander made it a point to regularly train right alongside his soldiers. When they were engaging in warfare tactics, learning the shield, learning the sword, learning the knife, learning the spear, all of the elements of war, Alexander was right beside them, training as a rank and file soldier. Now, because of that, he demonstrated a very important element of effective leadership. And what is that? It's leading by example. Alexander understood that he was not going to ask his soldiers to go to the ends of the earth to do what he wanted them to do if he was unwilling to learn to do it himself. If he was going to lead these soldiers into the unknown vastness of the known world and seek to conquer it, he wanted to understand combat from their perspective, how their weapons work, how their shields work, how their tactics work, and how the different types of military units, foot soldiers versus cavalry versus other types of military soldiers, how they all interacted and worked with each other so he could use that knowledge to his advantage. Now, not only did he train with his soldiers, Alexander also ate and drank with his soldiers. He lived life as one of them. Now, compare that to other military leaders of the past who remained apart from the rank and file. They saw themselves as above the rank of those that they were going to be leading. And as a result of that, there was never any connection or opportunity to build rapport. So Alexander made it his mission to get to know his men, to build rapport with them because he understood if he was going to ask them to fight on behalf of him and his kingdom, he wanted to know who they were and how to get to know them on a personal level so he could encourage, inspire, and have an opportunity to lead them where no one had gone before. And now think about it. By getting to know his soldiers on an intimate and on a personal level, what was he doing? He was gaining their confidence, he was gaining their trust, and he was gaining their allegiance because he was willing to be one of them. Alexander's soldiers, every single one of them knew that they were seen, that they were heard, that they were understood, they were appreciated, and the king knew their name. That in itself is powerful. How many leaders know the names and have really gotten to know the people that they're leading? Alexander gave a tremendous example for us there when it comes to personal leadership. Now, as the military prepared for battle, this is another area where Alexander again took an unconventional approach. Alexander prepared for battle right alongside his soldiers. Rather than going off to his own tent and preparing and going through the motions by himself, he dressed in his military attire right there with his men. And as he was dressing with them and preparing for battle, he was talking through the strategies that they were going to employ together on the battlefield. And while he was there with them, walking through strategy, he was encouraging them one-on-one as every single one of them prepared to take their place on the front line. And this is another way that Alexander's men saw him as one of them. He knew them by name, and I can see him standing in the line as they're preparing to go out to battle, and he's calling them by name and saying, this is what we're going to do to win. And it went beyond that because when the battle commenced, Alexander again broke with military tradition. Now, most military leaders fought from the rear. They were protected by the troops, and they were in an area where they could observe the battle at a distance so they could see the big picture, and they could then issue orders through couriers, through flags, or through other means to give orders to respond to the ebb and flow of battle. But they did this without putting themselves in great danger or personal risk. Now, if you look at the lives of Julius Caesar and Hannibal, two other great military leaders, they both led from behind. Very successful, but Alexander chose a different path. Alexander chose to lead from the front, to face the enemy head on. And rather than send orders down through the ranks, Alexander elected to be at the forefront, to charge right into the foray with his troops because he wanted to set the example of ferocity, of tenacity, and the confidence that he wanted his men to embrace. Alexander's supreme confidence, a belief that he and his soldiers could not lose, is considered one of the keys to Alexander's military success. Now, Alexander believed that he was godlike, and because he was godlike and passed that belief in his supreme authority, his soldiers believed that they too, because of their connection to Alexander, could not be defeated in battle. Now, I want to go back to the battle at Issus that we talked about a few minutes earlier because it's there we see another interesting leadership quality that Alexander displayed that's played out that again establishes something we need to understand when it comes to effective leading. Now, Darius, the king of Persia, had fled the battle and he left his family in Alexander's hands. Now, unlike other military rulers of the day who would maim, who would rape, who would murder, who would kill, or would otherwise abuse the captives of the king, Alexander did something differently. He treated Darius's captured royalty and nobility, his wife, his children, and other members of his staff, his noblemen, he treated them with great dignity and with great respect. Now, in doing this, he not only won their admiration and their loyalty and their support, but it helped Alexander also secure the loyalty and the support of the followers of the nobility. Now, this became a model that we saw repeated over and over again as Alexander expanded his conquest to literally take over the known world at the time. Now, another interesting thing about Alexander is that he made it a point after a battle to go visit the soldiers, to thank them for their effort in bringing about yet another victory. And one of the things to me that really stands out is the additional time that the king, Alexander the Great, spent with the soldiers who had been injured or wounded during the conflict. He would sit with them, he would nurse their wounds, and then he would give them the opportunity to tell the story of how they were injured, to relive the moment. And he gave them great autonomy to embellish these tales to their heart's content. Alexander wanted to relive the battle and relive the win because he understood what gets rewarded gets repeated. And he wanted them to relish the victory so that it gave them a means and a passion to recover so they could go win another battle. Now, Alexander not only met with them once, he continued to follow up with the wounded soldiers, checking on the recovery progress, showing them that he was genuinely interested in their welfare and their well being. And he appreciated the sacrifice of their lives for the sake of Alexander and his vision. Now, once again, think about the impact of that. The soldiers felt heard, seen, valued, and appreciated. They had an opportunity to tell their story and spend time one-on-one with the king, with the leader of the pack. Now, Alexander continually demonstrated his care and his concern for the welfare and the well-being of the people that he was leading, and this helped continually strengthen the bonds of loyalty and dedication to a leader who, in the eyes of his soldiers, was truly one of the people. Now, in battle, Alexander again was unconventional. Rather than following the prescribed rules of combat that all of the armies of that era tended to follow, Alexander was very intentional in his out-of-the-box approach to warfare. And because of the way that he would align his troops in unconventional positions and move them in manners that were not the prescribed rules of battle, he continually caught his foes off guard, allowing he and his soldiers to gain a tactical advantage. When his soldiers performed the unexpected, his enemies didn't know how to respond, and it gave him a strategic advantage time and time again over his opponents on the battlefield. Now, to kind of summarize what I've talked about up to this point, Alexander the Great's leadership was really characterized by really 2 to 3 things. One is charisma, two is tactical brilliance, and three, his ability to inspire loyalty in his troops. Now, he was not only a brilliant military leader who led from the front, Alexander was a highly skilled diplomat and an administrator. He used strategic alliances and he used cultural integration as well as his kind treatment of the captured nobility to win the hearts of the people that he had conquered as he worked to consolidate his territorial expansions across the known world. But every leader has his flaw, and Alexander was no different. Now, I want you to lean in and catch this mistake that Alexander made, because I continue to see this mistake repeated all throughout history, including right now, today. Now, Alexander's greatest leadership mistake should be very obvious. It was his failure to establish a lasting legacy that led to his demise. The only battle he ever lost was the battle for his future legacy and the future kingdom's opportunity to stay united. All of the work and all of the effort of 10 years of conquest failed because of a failure to lead beyond himself. Now, one of the primary responsibilities of a leader in any team, in any organization, is to equip and empower the people who will one day take his or her place. Now, this is how leadership is perpetuated in and through future generations. Understand this. It is a leader's job to work himself or herself out of a job, preparing those who will one day take their place, give them the opportunities to lead and to learn, and eventually pass the mantle of responsibility of leadership onto them. Now, Alexander failed and failed miserably in this key leadership role. He failed in two ways. Number one, he failed to establish a succession plan within his own family. And as a result of that, there was no clear heir to the throne when he died. Now, the second way he failed is Alexander failed to prepare a succession plan within his own military ranks to maintain the empire that they had bled and fought and died for as they forged forward over a decade of fighting to consolidate the known world under the rule of one man. And when Alexander died with no heir to the throne and no plan for succession, control was replaced with chaos. I mean, think about it this way. In the absence of leadership, what shows up? Confusion, conflict, and calamity. Those three things, confusion, conflict, and calamity, they take center stage when leadership is missing. Now, within just a few short years after Alexander's death, his kingdom was divided among his generals. Now, this resulted in an intense power struggle and ultimately civil war. All that Alexander had gained in terms of global conquest was lost in less than a decade. Think about it this way. The man who never lost a military battle as he conquered the known world ultimately ended up losing it all due to a failure to lead beyond himself. So, what's the moral of the story? What can we learn from Alexander the Great's life? And what is the leadership lesson his life wants to teach us? Well, here's what I can tell you. Alexander the Great's life, and it's a great study. If you ever have an opportunity to dig into it, there's some amazing books and some amazing video content on the life of Alexander the Great. Many, many things he taught us about effective leadership. And I want to leave you with 7 key leadership lessons from Alexander. Number 1, good leaders lead by example. We saw that in the life of Alexander as he trained with and he ate with and spent time with his soldiers. Alexander understood, as any good leader should understand, people do what people see. And if you're unwilling to do what you ask your people to do, and they know that, you're not leading by example. Number 2, good leaders get to know their people. Good leaders make sure that those they're leading know that they are seen, that they are valued, that they are heard, and that they're appreciated. A good leader knows the names of the people he or her are leading, and they know their story. Number 3, good leaders are confident. Good leaders believe they can win, and they work to instill that belief in the people that they're leading. Why? Because confidence is a prerequisite for success. Number 4, good leaders take the high road. They treat other people the way they would want to be treated if the roles were reversed. We saw that in Alexander's kind, chivalrous treatment of the nobility that he conquered and ultimately got them to become his allies, and as a result of that, won the hearts of the people. Character matters, and good leaders are men and women of good morals and good character. Number 5, good leaders constantly check on their people. Good leaders who love their people and value their people are genuinely concerned with the welfare and the well-being of those they're leading, and they check in on them regularly to see how they're living life. Number 6, good leaders challenge the status quo. They are not content with good enough. They are intentional about learning, growing, and improving not only themselves, but learning and growing and improving those around them. And then number 7, and this is where Alexander failed. Good leaders equip and empower the people who will one day take their place. Good leaders understand that a leader's lasting legacy is defined by how well those who lead after them continue to build upon what they were given and make it even better. Now, remember, the man who never lost a military battle as he conquered the known world ultimately ended up losing it all due to a failure to lead beyond himself. So the legacy you're going to leave behind is going to be determined by the people that you're preparing today. Those people who will one day take the mantle of leadership from you and they will place it on their shoulders and they will one day lead in your stead. So the foundation of your team or your organization's future success is predicated on how well you are leading beyond yourself today and every single day. So I want to leave you with a question, and I want you to really take a moment to think about it. If you as a leader were taken out of the picture tomorrow, who takes your place? Does that individual or individuals know what you know? Can they do what you do? Can they lead and inspire others as you have led and inspired others? Do those you're leading know these are the people that you have picked and that you have prepared and are preparing that will one day take your place when you're gone? Are those people prepared to not only continue, but to continue to learn, to grow, to expand, and to succeed? If not, like Alexander, your kingdom will die with you. I'm Dr. John Terry, the Black Belt Leader. Thanks for joining me, and have a great day.